Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Hartford Regionals is this weekend, and so before the Hartford Regionals started, I want to give you guys some of my top picks for the decks that you'll play this weekend. Now all these decks are pretty common, so you've probably already talked about them before, but I do want to go into detail and give you some depth. Maybe this will help you choose your deck if you plan on attending Hartford. So first thing in my observation about the Sun and Moon Burning Shadows format. First thing, games are usually decided by draws. This isn't a format that is extremely skill intensive, and when I say by draws, I mean as though it usually comes down to which player draws better. Going first is also a big deal in this format. Whether or not I get that extra turn to respond to you, that's important. Do you hit your Bridget on your first turn? That's important. But a lot of my games that I played online kind of come down to, okay, I hit this Guzma or do I hit this Choice Band to win the game? So there are those key turns where you have to draw something in order to win. Not a lot of games where you kind of outplay your opponent, from what I've noticed at least. Also, almost every deck has a matchup that is a near auto loss. So the way the weaknesses work out in this format are pretty interesting, being that every popular Pokemon deck, they have a weakness that is also pretty popular. So for example, you have Gardevoir, and then you have Metagross, and then with Metagross you have Fire, and then with Fire you have Greninja, and then with Greninja you have Golisopod, and then with Golisopod you have Fire. So it makes it very hard to go ahead and choose a deck because you always have those decks that are just gonna most of the time blow you out. And I think that is something that is very interesting about this format, and I don't see that changing very soon. Don't think the next set is going to change too much. Also, due to the loss of Earthseeker, resource management is now more important than ever. I really must say that it is pretty annoying having to manage all your resources, especially when it comes to Pokemon. If you're not playing a lot of Super Rods, or if you're playing that one Rescue Stretcher, you have to be very much more mindful of your resources. Same thing with supporters. Before you know, you can run out of Sycamores, run out of N, and that can really be bad in the late game. So resource management is very important. I can't emphasize that enough. Bench space is also extremely tight. I love Lele, but I really miss Shaman. Being able to Sky Return was big, and the fact that when I play down a Lele, yes, Lele is a good attacker, yes, Lele has more HP, and Lele is probably the better card. However, with Lele being on my bench, and being that I might have to use the the ability anywhere from 1 to 3 times, it's pretty rough. Finally, Garbodor isn't nearly as hard to deal with. I don't think Garbodor really polarizes this meta a lot, and when I play against Golisopod Garbodor decks, I tend not to care too much. Like, I'll go and count my item cards, and I usually don't have that many. So Garbodor has not been the pain that it was in the previous format from what I've observed so far. So with that being said, let me get into my top picks for Hartford Regionals, starting with, of course, Gardevoir. So I'm going to go over the pros and cons of this deck. So Gardevoir is a deck that is able to take one-hit KOs out of nowhere. The ceiling on Infinite Force is extremely high, and sometimes even when it's extremely low, it's still a very good card. Has great consistency. You can play Sylveon in it. You can play Artillery in it. You can Rare Candy into Gallade and Premonition to set up your draws. So it is a deck with amazing consistency. It also has built-in acceleration with Secret Spring. And if you paid attention to my videos in the past, I have always said that Pokemon with energy acceleration, or decks in general with energy acceleration, tend to be the best decks of the format. And Gardevoir has that built in. It has great recovery with Twilight GX. Also, you can Acerola if you have enough of them out. And also Secret Spring allows you to come back and deal damage with Infinite Force very quickly. So it recovers very well. And it is also great against grass decks that have been very much hyped up, such as Golisopod. And it trades very, very well. 230 damage is hard to deal with. It is a good number. A lot of decks cannot one-hit KO Gardevoir unless they weaken it first. So it usually trades extremely well with a lot of things in the meta, and a lot of times for small investment. Like if you have a Ho-Oh, okay, I attach 1 energy to my Gardevoir, and I'm already hitting your Ho for 150 if you have 4 attached. So it trades very well, and it trades very well for very little. Cons about Gardevoir: it can struggle against ability lock. Decks such as Greninja and a Garbodor, Garbotoxin in play really put a damper on Gardevoir GX because they definitely want to be able to use that Secret Spring, Premonition, those types of things, especially Octillery. And it also loses to Metagross. Metagross just very easily knocks out Gardevoir. Metagross has 250 HP. Gardevoir needs a lot of energies to deal with the Metagross, and even after they've dealt with it, the Metagross can just come back up. The Metagross deck can just easily come back up and knock out the Gardevoir. But as you can see here, Gardevoir has a lot of pros going on for it. Another thing, though, I do feel as though it does have a target on its back, so that's also something to watch out for. It has a very, very large target on its back. So yeah, that is Gardevoir. If you want to play it, go ahead, be my guest. Next deck we're going to talk about is Golisopod Garbodor. So pros about Golisopod Garbodor, it hits extremely fast and hard. All you have to do is get out a Wimpod turn 1 and bridge it. You can retreat the Wimpod to the branch. I just love the synergy between Golisopod, Wimpod, and Guzma and Acerola. Oh, just so much synergy there. But Golisopod can come back up and knock out a basic and can knock out a Tapu Koko. It can do a lot of damage. Also, it trades very well due to Acerola, so they waste a turn attacking your Golisopod, and you essentially take their turn away by just going Acerola, putting the Golisopod back in your deck, evolving into a new one, and attacking with that. It has ability lock with Garb. Decks with ability lock are really good right now. There are a lot of decks right now that rely on abilities. You have Metagross, you have Gardevoir, you have Greninja, and then in addition you have Tapu Lele. However, sometimes I can feel like this card is a hindrance because a lot of times I'll be playing against a Garbodor Golisopod deck and they'll put the Float Stone onto their Garbodor, and sometimes it loses them the game because they at that point can't use Tapu Lele to hit the cards that they need. And yeah, it's a tricky combo to use. Great recovery, again, due to Acerola. Garbodor attacks for 1, Golisopod attacks for 1. There are just synergies there as well. And it can be built very versatile. So even on the Golisopod side or on the Garbodor side. So on the Garbodor side, you can run it a lot of different ways. A lot of people were running it with Zoroark. People did very well over in Europe running it with Drampa. Golisopod, a lot of people have been playing it pure. You can play Golisopod a lot of different ways. So I love that these two Pokemon can be built very versatile. Fire, though, for Golisopod is almost an auto loss, depending on what kind of build that you are running. And it really wants 10 more HP. I can't emphasize this enough. If Golisopod had 220 HP, it would be such a better card. Decks just hit that number or can manipulate that number so well. So with the Drampa, you can take Golisopod down to 180 and then knock it out with a Berserk. With Ninetales, all they have to do is spread once and it goes to 190 and you can knock it out with the, I think it's called Blizzard Edge, I believe. So Golisopod just really wants 10 more HP. But other than that, I really love Golisopod. I think that it and Gardevoir are probably competing for the best GX in the game. Golisopod just has 3 amazing attacks. That's also a pro that are all really good. Armor Press, First Impression, Cross and Cut. I would not hate to use any of those attacks. So I really love Golisopod. And its first attack does require constant outs. That is another problem with this Pokemon. You always have to use Acerola. You always have to have that Guzma. So sometimes you could be stuck in the active and you don't have a way to get to that DC and you end up having to use First Impression for a measly 30. You never want to do that. So that is another issue with Golisopod. The first attack always requires constant outs. But decks tend to run 4 Float, 3 Acerola, 4 Guzma. So hitting those outs I found is not that hard. It's been very rare when I've been playing this deck where I've had the First Impression for measly damage. Alright, Fire variants. So let's look at that. Pros with Fire variants, Kiawe, of course. Turn 1 Kiawe, 4 energy, slap them down, and then just start wrecking face. No other deck has this option. And I think that that's one of the things that puts Fire over the top as far as being able to even compete. I don't think if Kiawe wasn't a card, I think that Fire would lose a lot in that. And you can attach it to a Ho-Oh. And it can one-hit KO the entire format. Ho-Oh does 180, Volcanion, Steam Up, Steam Up. Metagross is already weak, so hitting 250 is a mute point. So the number you really want to hit is 230, and the math just works out really well in this deck to be able to hit that. So it can one-hit KO the entire format. It can do it very easily, and it can be also built very versatile. You can play the Salazzle version, you can play pure Volcanion, you can play it with a Ho-Oh focus. It's just up to you. So I really like that about this deck. Cons: it has a tough Gardevoir and Ninetales matchup. Gardevoir just punishes decks that want a lot of energies, and hitting that 230 is possible, but it is a little difficult. It requires you to have a lot of outs to do so, and trust me, I played Fire enough to know this. Also, it does not have the strongest late game. Most of the games I've been winning against Fire is when they go off, they do a lot early game, and then in the late game, they kind of fizzle out. And they lose their attackers, or they have to spend that one turn using Turtonator, and then you take a knockout on one of the things they used with Turt, and then they have one more attacker, especially if it's not Turt, then they have to discard 2 more energies, and then at that point they're back to square one. So their recovery in their late game is not that great, but Fire can just end up running you over early game. I think the Volcanion probably has the Volcanion version has the best late game, being able to use power heater with the Volcanion that is non-EX. So I really do like Fire. I think it's something that a lot of people are going to rely on. It's not the most difficult deck to play. It's a comfortable deck. It hits really hard. It goes really fast. So we'll see how Fire does. Next deck is Metagross, which probably is one of the best ones in my opinion. Metagross is very bulky and hard to KO, 250 HP, oh my gosh. Then when you combine that with Max Potion, like geez, if you are not a Fire Pokemon, you are not taking a one-shot on Metagross. Great late game also because of its Geotech system. It just literally just 3 energies back from the discard, 3 energies, 3 more energies. I just retreat, I'll Max Potion, I'll put 3 back. So it's very resilient. If you let Metagross get set up, odds are you are going to have a tough time winning. And it can play Necrozma, which is also a really good card. It gives the deck options, and I think Necrozma is what kind of pushed it over the top. Mimikyu is very good in this deck as well for certain niche things, but Necrozma is really good as it can one-shot every Pokemon in the Fire deck for 3 psychic energy. It also gives you more synergies with GX attacks, because then at that point you can use the GX attack that does 100 everywhere. So Necrozma is a really good bonus to the deck, and Turtonator being able to hit that 190 is very important. A lot of decks are now teching in Turtonators, and Necrozma just deals with it so well. Cons about it is it can't function under ability lock. If your opponent is playing Greninja, good luck winning with Metagross. If your opponent is able to stick a Garbodor, good luck winning with Metagross. And then it kind of loses the Fire decks. I don't know. People in Orlando have been playing Metagross and defeating Fire decks due to Necrozma, I believe, and probably Mimikyu. So it's probably not as bad of a matchup as I think it is. And because of that, I think Metagross is one of the more stronger decks, because it's auto loss. Anytime your auto loss is winnable, you're a good deck, right? Especially when you do so well against other decks in the field. However, I do think Greninja is probably even worse, you know, of a matchup, because all they have to do is just really just sit there and Shadow Stitch, and Metagross really struggles. And that brings us to our next one, Greninja. I think this deck is very, very slept on. One thing that is very great about Greninja is you have those one prize attackers. One prize attackers, always really, really good. It has ability lock that cannot be shut off. Ranger is out of the format, so once they use Shadow Stitching, good luck trying to get out of that, because you're not. So Shadow Stitching is a lot better in this format, and I really like Greninja for that. And it is very hard for top tier decks to deal with. So like Gardevoir, Metagross, Water decks, those 3 decks have a very hard time dealing with Greninja a lot of the time. And in addition, it does very well against Espeon. So that's a niche strategy that is coming up, or not even a niche strategy. Espeon has, I was looking today, Espeon has gone on up a lot in price. So it does very well against Espeon EX, because once you evolve into Greninja Break, if they go try to devolve your Greninja Break, I mean, you're at 130 HP. So it's hard to get Greninja up to that 130 in order for Espeon to even be a thing. So I like that about the deck. Cons though, has very bad consistency issues. As always with Greninja, it tends to be a deck that loses to itself. It lost Dive Ball. You don't really want to play Talonflame in this format. You don't really want to play Tapu Leles, because that can give away 2 prizes. So again, the consistency with Greninja has always been a thing. And then the biggest thing is it loses to Golisopod. In all my testing, Greninja versus Golisopod just runs you over. It's not even close. It's just so easy for Golisopod to beat you. If you beat Golisopod, I would say this matchup is probably like 95-5. If you are able to beat or maybe 90-10, I don't know. If you're able to beat a Golisopod with Greninja, you got extremely lucky. And I think Golisopod is popular enough for people not to play this deck, but as I said, almost every deck has that very bad matchup. So it's just a meta call. I think it can do very well if a person gets lucky enough. Alright, so additional decks. Alolan Ninetales GX, this is something that has picked up a lot of steam over the past couple of weeks, especially with Potown. I played at a League Cup. I went 2-0, then I went 2-2. I didn't do the hottest, but I do think Ninetales has a lot of potential. I don't think it's something that I want to play in 9 rounds, and I think it's probably, out of all the decks that we've gone over so far, one of the more skill-intensive decks, because the deck can do a lot of things, and you have to be very peculiar in the way that you do them. So I think Alolan Ninetales would do good in the hands of a great player. I know Pram has been playing it really, really well lately. Weavile, Rule of Evil. This is something that has came up as a rogue option, and I've been testing Weavile a little bit. I am not that impressed, but I just think that it's just so powerful. There are so many Pokemon with abilities in our format that I think Weavile is going to end up doing something one point or another. Another deck I forgot to mention also is Tapu Bulu, and I kind of feel bad for not mentioning that deck in here at all, but I just want to give a shout out to Tapu Bulu. Vikavolt, that is a really, really good deck. Tapu Bulu is extremely hard to deal with, but I think that it kind of falls into some of the pitfalls that Gardevoir and Metagross may fall into, being so reliant on ability lock, and I don't think that that one is nearly as consistent. And the late game for that one is shaky as well, so I just want to say those things about Tapu Bulu. Alright, and then Xerneas Break. This is something that has came out. You guys know how much I love fairy decks. So this came out at the tournament in Europe and live stream. Xerneas, let me just tell you, Xerneas beats a lot of things. There are a lot of things that one thing that doesn't beat, again, and like I said, Ninetales is weak to metal, Xerneas is weak to metal, so the way that these good cards in this format just end up being so weak to each other is so interesting. But Xerneas is very, very good because the format has slowed down, so being able to Geomancy 2-3 times and then having Max Elixir plus DCE, Xerneas can knock out most EXs in the format on turns 3 to 4, on your turn 3 to 4. So it is not something to be slept on. It is, again, a one prize attacker, much like Greninja, and a lot of decks just give it too much time. Greninja gives Xerneas too much time. Golisopod, you can't one-shot. It has 130 HP. Golisopod can't one-shot the non-break Xerneas, so Golisopod a lot of times will give you too much time. Ninetales especially gives you too much time. So a lot of decks give Xerneas too much time, and at that point it's all over. And it has a decent, very resilient late game Xerneas Break. So I am excited to see how this does this weekend. However, metal is a thing, and Xerneas really struggles against metal because, and it's not even because it one-shot Xerneas, because a lot of things do that, but it's the fact that Metagross has 250 HP. Like, even with Gardevoir, like, 230 is doable, but 250 is asking a lot from Xerneas. Alright, and then finally we have Decidueye, which, again, that should probably be Tapu Bulu, because I don't think Decidueye is necessarily great, and I don't think it has the greatest matchups. I think the deck just wants to do too much. Forest is gone, and it plays too much, and it has too many inconsistencies, in my opinion, personally, for it to really work. However, Feather Arrow and Hollow Hunt are still really good. 240 HP is great, but I think being the fact that Fire is very popular at the moment, and you have decks such as Garbodor, Xerneas Break, like these aren't, Ninetales even, these are not the greatest matchups for Decidueye, so I think that's the deck if you were considering it. That's one I wouldn't play, but I did want to mention it. But again, Bulu, I think that probably would be, should be here in place of Weavile or Decidueye, so keep that in mind. I don't want you to forget about that deck. Alright, finally, thank you for watching. I'll see you in Hartford. I'll be there. Please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this or you've gained any type of insight from this. I am so excited to be playing this season. I'm so happy to be back. I'm loving the community. Again, try and fall back in love with the community at least. So, again, thanks for watching. See you in Hartford.